A single father, two jobs, one impossible battle. Carter Hayes made a choice that night. The wrong choice, or maybe the right one. He still doesn't know.
The storm's getting worse.
3 days.
We need to get this fixed.
That's all
It's
the
so
time
dark.
he
Can you
had
see
left
anything?
before
I
a
think it's the
judge would
battery.
decide if he deserved to keep his daughter. 3 days before the state could rip Lily from his arms and hand her over to a woman who'd already abandoned her once. 3 days to somehow prove that love mattered more than the zeros in a bank account. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, he was just trying to get home. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Carter untied his apron for the last time that shift. 11:45 on a Friday night, and his feet screamed inside steel-toed boots that had seen better years. 14 hours, 2 different uniforms, 2 completely different worlds. Mornings spent fixing HVAC systems in office buildings where secretaries looked through him like he was part of the furniture. Evenings slinging coffee and pie to truckers who at least had the decency to see him as human. The tip jar felt light when he emptied it into his palm. $52 in wrinkled bills and coins that stuck together. Enough to pay Nancy Miller for watching Lily. Enough for groceries if he stuck to the basics. Not enough to impress a family court judge who'd probably never set foot in a place like this. Outside, the October air carried the first whisper of winter. Carter's Honda Civic sat alone under the flickering parking lot light, rust spreading across the wheel wells like a disease he couldn't afford to cure. The dashboard clock glowed green, 11:47 p.m. The Zaytriothup sat in the passenger seat where he'd left it that morning, the words blurring together after he'd read them so many times. Hayes versus Bennett, custody hearing. Monday, 9 a.m. 72 hours. That's what people needed to survive in a desert without water. Carter had 72 hours to prove he was worth more than Jessica Bennett's bank account, more than her parents' old Tampa money, more than the $1,000 an hour lawyer who'd never lost a custody case. The engine coughed twice before catching. Classic rock drifted from the radio. George Strait singing about carrying love wherever he went. Carter pulled onto the empty street, his headlights cutting through darkness that felt heavier than usual. His phone buzzed. A text from Brian Foster, the overworked legal aid attorney who'd drawn the short straw of Carter's case. Carter, prepare yourself. They have a new witness. Not good. Carter's hands tightened on the wheel. Not good. As if anything about this week had been good. As if Jess showing up after 2 years with a smile and a sobriety chip somehow erased finding Lily alone in their old apartment, crying in a soiled diaper because her mother had been gone for 15 hours chasing a high. The memory still woke him up some nights. Lily's face when he'd walked through that door, the way she'd reached for him with arms that shook, the smell of fear and neglect that had filled those rooms. 4 years old, and already learning that the people who were supposed to love you most could vanish without warning. He'd filed for divorce the next day, full custody 3 months after that. 2 years of relative peace, of building something that resembled normal, bedtime stories and Saturday pancakes and parent-teacher conferences where Ms. Anderson told him Lily was thriving, happy, loved. Then Jess's parents had hired Kenneth Pierce, and suddenly 2 years of being present didn't matter as much as the square footage of his apartment, or the fact that he worked 70 hours a week just to keep the lights on. The radio cut to a weather alert. Carter turned it up. Tropical storm Elena has strengthened to Category 1 hurricane status and is expected to make landfall along the Gulf Coast around midnight. Residents are advised to seek shelter immediately. Emergency services have suspended operations until the storm passes. This is not a drill. Carter glanced at the sky through his windshield. Black clouds rolled overhead, backlit by lightning that turned the world white for frozen seconds. The first raindrops hit like bullets. 72 hours to prove he was enough. And now a hurricane. Of course. By the time Carter merged onto Interstate 75, the rain had transformed from bullets to a waterfall. His wipers struggled at their highest setting, creating brief windows of clarity before the deluge swallowed everything again. The road ahead disappeared into sheets of water that reflected his headlights back at him. 18 hours awake. His eyes burned. His shoulders ached from crawling through tight spaces all morning, replacing faulty ductwork in buildings he'd never be able to afford to work inside. His lower back throbbed from standing on concrete floors all evening, refilling coffee for people who never looked up from their phones long enough to say thank you. But Lily was waiting. That's what mattered. Always waiting. Always trusting that Daddy would come home, even when Daddy was late. Even when Daddy was too tired to do anything but collapse beside her and read one story before his eyes refused to stay open. Nancy Miller would have put her to bed by now, would have made sure she brushed her teeth and said her prayers. Would have stayed until Carter walked through that door because Nancy understood what it meant to show up, to be there even when being there was inconvenient. The highway stretched empty except for Carter's lonely headlights. Smart people had already found shelter. Smart people weren't driving through a Category 1 hurricane because they'd worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford to call in sick, couldn't afford to give Jess's lawyers one more piece of ammunition. The radio crackled with another warning, the announcer's voice tight with urgency, but Carter's mind had already drifted to Monday morning, to standing in front of Judge Victor Bradford, a man whose name Brian had spoken with something between respect and fear, and explaining why a father who worked 2 jobs was better than a mother with a trust fund and a 3-month sobriety chip. Lightning split the sky directly overhead. Thunder followed immediately, shaking the car. And then Carter saw them. Hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. A dark shape on the shoulder, barely visible. 2 figures standing in the rain beside what looked like an expensive car, the kind Carter only saw when wealthy clients brought their vehicles into Frank Turner's shop. He passed them, foot still on the gas, eyes forward. Not your problem. You've got enough problems. But something made him look in the rearview mirror. Through the rain and darkness, he could make out 2 people huddled together, shoulders hunched against the storm. Young. Scared. Lily's face flashed in his mind, not as she was now, but as she'd been that day 2 years ago. Alone. Abandoned. Waiting for someone to care enough to stop. Carter's foot hit the brake harder than he meant to. The car fishtailed slightly on the wet asphalt before he regained control. He checked his mirrors, no other traffic, nobody else stupid enough to be out here, and executed a careful U-turn. The Mercedes came into focus as he approached. Silver E-Class. Hood popped open, rain pouring into the engine compartment. 2 girls in their early 20s stood beside it, expensive jackets soaked through, designer shoes caked with mud. Identical faces tracked his approach with expressions caught between hope and wariness. Carter pulled onto the shoulder ahead of them and killed his engine. For a moment, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, asking himself what the hell he was doing. Jess's lawyer would love this. Working-class hero stops to help stranded rich girls, trying to manufacture sympathy, paint himself as some kind of saint. Except nobody would ever know. And these 2 girls were still standing in a hurricane. He grabbed his phone, checked the battery, 42%, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him like a physical force, immediately soaking through his work shirt. The wind threatened to rip the door from his hands as he pushed it shut. He jogged toward the girls, squinting against water that ran into his eyes. They watched him approach. The one on the left stepped slightly in front of her sister, protective instinct Carter recognized from his own life. He had to shout over the thunder, "Car trouble?" The protective one nodded, water streaming down her face. Blonde hair that probably cost a fortune to maintain hung in dark ropes around her shoulders. It just died. We've been here almost an hour. Our phones are dead and nobody stopped. Her sister added, voice small but carrying gratitude. Until you. Carter moved to the Mercedes, its hood already open to the elements. He pulled out his phone, using its flashlight, to examine the engine. Water had pooled everywhere, but that wasn't the main problem. The battery terminals were heavily corroded, the connections loose enough that he could see the gap. Simple fix under normal circumstances. Impossible fix in the middle of a hurricane.
Your battery's shot.
He called back, closing the hood before more rain could flood the compartment.
You're not going anywhere tonight without a jump or a tow.
The protective sister's shoulders slumped. Can we call someone? Your phones are dead, and so's your car battery. And in this storm, Carter gestured at the empty highway. Nobody's coming. They looked at each other, silent communication passing between them. Fear, exhaustion, the slowly dawning reality of being stranded. Carter should have gotten back in his car, should have wished them luck and driven away. He had exactly zero obligation to these strangers and plenty of reasons to get home. But he thought of Lily again, thought of her standing somewhere in the rain years from now, scared and alone, hoping someone would care enough to stop. The words came out before he could reconsider. I can give you a ride. There's a hotel about 20 minutes from here. You can call a tow in the morning. Both girls stared at him like he'd just offered them a winning lottery ticket. You do that? The second sister asked, genuine shock in her voice. Carter shrugged against the rain hammering his shoulders. Can't leave you out here. Come on. They grabbed expensive bags from their disabled car, Coach, he noticed, Tory Birch, and followed him to the Honda. The contrast was almost comical when they slid into his beaten interior, surrounded by fast food wrappers he'd been meaning to clean, and the faint smell of motor oil that never quite left his work clothes. But neither of them complained. They just looked relieved to be out of the storm. Carter pulled back onto the highway, windshield wipers working overtime. The silence stretched for almost a minute before the girl in the passenger seat spoke. I'm Claire. This is my twin sister, Sophia. Carter Hayes. Claire studied his profile in the dashboard lights. You work on cars? He glanced down at his uniform shirt, the embroidered patch that read Frank's HVAC and Repair. HVAC mostly. Air conditioning, heating systems. But I know my way around an engine. You're soaked, Sophia observed from the back seat. Yeah, well. Carter turned the heater up, though it would take time to warm the car. Occupational hazard of stopping in hurricanes. Why did you stop? Claire's question carried genuine curiosity, not accusation. We waved at probably 30 cars. Everyone just kept going. Can't blame them. People are scared these days. Nobody wants to take chances on strangers. But you did. Carter was quiet for a moment, focusing on the road. The rain had started to ease slightly, downgrading from apocalyptic to merely terrible. I have a daughter, he finally said. She's 6. If she was ever stranded somewhere, scared, in the rain... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The words hung in the air between them, carrying weight Carter hadn't intended. He'd just admitted to having a child to 2 complete strangers, and now they'd naturally wonder what kind of father leaves his 6-year-old daughter to drive through a hurricane. Claire's voice came softer this time. What's her name? Lily. That's beautiful. A pause. Do you get to see her often? The question landed like a punch to the solar plexus. Carter's hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw clenching before he could stop it. These girls couldn't have known, couldn't have guessed that they'd just poked the rawest wound in his life. Every chance I get. The words came out rough. Which might not be for much longer. He hadn't meant to say that. Hadn't meant to crack open the door on the nightmare that had consumed the last 3 months.
But exhaustion and stress had worn down his filters, and something about these strangers felt safe. They'd be gone in 20 minutes, never to see him again. No judgment that would follow him home. What do you mean? Sophia leaned forward between the seats. Carter stared at the road ahead, the white lines that appeared and disappeared in the rain. His voice came out flat, emotionless, the way he'd trained it to sound when talking about things that could destroy him if he let them. Her mother and I are divorced. She's trying to take full custody. Says I'm not fit to be a father because I work too much, don't make enough money. Court date's Monday morning. That's horrible, Claire whispered. It is what it is, though his voice betrayed him, cracking slightly on the last word. I'm doing everything I can. 2 jobs, saving every penny, showing up to every school event. But sometimes, he stopped, aware he was sharing too much with these strangers. Sometimes it feels like it's not enough. Like the world's already decided I'm not good enough. The silence that followed felt different than before. Heavier. More personal. Sophia's voice came quiet from the back seat. Our father's like that. Always working. We barely see him. Claire picked up the thread. He has all the money in the world. Big house, nice cars, everything. But we traded all just to have dinner with him once a week without him checking his phone. He thinks providing means everything, Sophia added. Doesn't understand that we just want him there. Present. Carter glanced at Claire. You should tell him that. We've tried. Sadness colored her words. He doesn't listen. Says we don't understand what it takes to maintain our lifestyle. Sounds lonely. It is, Claire admitted. Money doesn't fix loneliness. It just makes it more comfortable. The phrase settled into Carter's chest, finding a home there. He'd been poor most of his life, had known what it meant to choose between gas and groceries, between fixing the car and fixing the heater. But he'd never been lonely. Not really. Not with Lily. These girls had everything he lacked materially, and nothing that actually mattered. What does your dad do? The question came out before Carter thought about whether he wanted to know. He's a judge, Claire said. Federal court. Of course he was. Carter nearly laughed at the bitter irony. Here he was, driving 2 daughters of the judiciary through a hurricane while preparing to face a different judge in 72 hours. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Victor Bradford, Sophia offered. You might have heard of him. Carter ran the name through his memory, coming up empty. No, my judge is... He tried to remember what Brian had told him. The name had slipped away in the chaos of everything else. I don't remember. My lawyer mentioned it. The conversation drifted after that. Claire asking gentle questions about Lily, what she liked to draw, her favorite books, whether she was doing well in 1st grade. Carter answered, surprised by how easy it was to talk about his daughter with these strangers. How the knot in his chest loosened slightly when he described Lily's laugh. The way she narrated her drawings with elaborate stories. How she'd started reading on her own and wouldn't stop showing him every new word she conquered. She sounds amazing, Claire said. She is. No hesitation, no doubt. She's everything. Our dad never talks about us like that, Sophia murmured. Like we're his whole world. Maybe he does, Carter suggested. Just not to you. Some people don't know how to say what they feel. Or maybe he doesn't feel it. Claire's voice carried a resignation that came from years of disappointment. Maybe work really is more important to him. Carter wanted to argue, to defend a man he'd never met. but he had no ground to stand on. He didn't know Judge Victor Bradford, didn't know if the man loved his daughters or merely tolerated them as obligations. Some fathers were built differently, saw providing as the sum total of their duty, never understanding that children needed presence more than presence. The Hilton emerged from the rain, its lit entrance a beacon of warmth and safety. Carter pulled under the covered drop-off area, putting the car in park. Claire and Sophia gathered their bags, movement slow, like they didn't want the ride to end. "Thank you," Claire said, turning to face Carter. "You didn't have to stop, but you did." "It's fine." "It's not fine, it's—" She searched for words. "It's the kind of thing that restores your faith in people." Sophia leaned forward from the back seat. "I hope your judge sees what we see, that you're exactly the kind of father Lily needs." The words hit harder than Carter expected. His throat tightened. "Thanks." Claire pulled a pen from her purse, scribbling something on the back of a receipt. "Here's my number. If you need a character witness or something for Monday, we'd be happy to tell the judge about tonight." Carter took the paper, though he had no intention of using it. Two college girls testifying about a random act of kindness wouldn't change Kenneth Pierce's carefully constructed narrative about the unfit father who couldn't provide a stable home. But he appreciated the gesture. "Thank you, really." They climbed out into the covered entrance, waving one more time before disappearing through the sliding glass doors. Carter sat there for a moment, engine idling, watching rain pour off the overhang in sheets. His phone buzzed. A text from Nancy Miller. "Honey, are you close? Lily tried to wait up but fell asleep." Carter typed back. 20 minutes. Sorry it's so late." "Don't apologize. Drive safe in this weather." He pulled away from the hotel, pointing the Honda toward home. The radio had switched to local news, reports of flooding on the east side, downed power lines, emergency shelters opening for those who needed them. The storm was supposed to blow through by morning, leaving behind the usual debris and damage. Carter's mind wandered to Monday, to standing in front of a judge whose name he couldn't remember and whose face he'd never seen. To Kenneth Pierce presenting photos of Carter's small apartment, financial records that showed more month than money, work schedules that proved he was never home. Brian Foster would do his best with what they had: teacher testimonials, Nancy Miller's affidavit about Carter's dedication, Lily's school records showing she was thriving. But Michelson had something they didn't: Jessica Bennett's sobriety documentation, her new job offer, her parents' financial backing that could give Lily private schools and dance lessons and every material advantage. And maybe that's what judges looked for. Maybe stability meant money instead of love. Maybe the zeros in a bank account carried more weight than the 0 times Carter had ever let Lily down. The apartment complex came into view. 3 stories of faded brick and rusted railings, windows glowing yellow in the darkness. Home. Not much to look at, but it was theirs. Carter parked in his assigned spot, grabbed his work bag, and jogged through the rain to the covered stairwell. His boots left wet prints on the concrete steps leading to the second floor. The door to 2B opened before he could get his key out. Nancy Miller stood there in her floral housecoat, silver hair pulled back, face lined with 70 years of life that had taught her when to speak and when to listen. "Honey, you're soaked through." "It's biblical out there." Carter stepped inside, immediately lowering his voice. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the window unit struggling to keep up with October's last gasp of heat. "She asleep?" "On the couch. Tried to wait up, but her eyes wouldn't stay open past 10. Nancy gathered her knitting bag, movements slow and deliberate. "She drew you something. It's on the table." Carter pulled out his wallet, extracting a $20 bill that represented tomorrow's lunch. He held it out to Nancy. She waved it away. Honey, keep it. You need it more than I do. Mrs. Davis, I mean it. Her voice carried that Southern Baptist steel that allowed no argument. You've got that court date Monday. You save every penny. Carter's throat tightened. He tucked the bill into her hand anyway, closing her fingers around it. You've helped me more than you know. Please. Nancy studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Her free hand came up to pat his cheek, the gesture so maternal it made Carter's eyes burn. The Lord doesn't bring us this far to abandon us now, sweetheart. You remember that. She left, pulling the door shut with a quiet click. Carter stood in the entryway, water dripping from his clothes onto the cheap linoleum, listening to the sound of his daughter's breathing from the living room. He set his work bag down carefully, moved through the small kitchen, dishes clean in the drainer, Lily's plastic cup on the counter ready for morning, and found his daughter exactly where Nancy had said. Lily lay on the threadbare couch, covered by the quilt Nancy had made for her 3rd birthday. One arm hung off the edge, fingers curled loosely. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, face peaceful in sleep. 6 years old, and already the most beautiful thing Carter had ever created. On the coffee table sat her latest drawing, held down by a crayon box. Carter picked it up carefully. 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, standing beside something that might have been an air conditioning unit. Daddy and me fixing things, written across the top in Lily's careful 1st-grade letters, hearts floating around their heads. Something in Carter's chest cracked. He sank onto the edge of the couch, drawing still in his hands, and just looked at his daughter. She stirred, eyelids fluttering. Daddy? Hey, baby girl. He brushed hair away from her face. Sorry I'm late. Lily's eyes opened fully, immediately tracking to his wet clothes. You're all wet. Big storm out there. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. The quilt fell away, and Carter could see she was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the stars that were starting to fade from too many washes. Did you see my picture? Just now. It's perfect. That's us from when you fixed Mrs. Davis's air conditioning, and I helped. You were a very good helper. Carter set the drawing down, pulling Lily into his lap, even though she was getting too big for this, even though she'd probably squirm away in a minute. For now, she settled against his chest, small and warm and real. Daddy? Yeah, baby? Mrs. Davis said Monday is an important day. Carter's heart stuttered. She did? She said you have to go somewhere important, but she didn't say where. Lily tilted her head back to look at him, brown eyes serious in a way 6-year-olds shouldn't have to be. Where are you going? He should have prepared for this. Should have come up with something to say that was honest without being terrifying. But exhaustion and emotion had burned through his defenses. Daddy has to go to court. It's a place where judges make decisions. What kind of decisions? Carter's arms tightened around her. Decisions about families, about where kids should live. Lily went very still. When she spoke again, her voice came out small and scared. Mommy said I might have to live with her, that you can't take care of me. The words landed like physical blows. Carter closed his eyes, fighting back the rage that wanted to explode at Jess for putting this fear into their daughter, for making Lily worry about things that should never touch a child's world. Lily, look at Daddy. She turned in his lap, studying his face with an intensity that reminded Carter of how perceptive she'd always been,
how she could read emotions he tried to hide. "Mommy is wrong." He kept his voice steady, certain, even though nothing felt certain anymore.
Daddy can take care of you. Daddy will take care of you. No matter what happens Monday, I'm your dad and I love you more than anything in this world.
"I don't want to leave you."
Tears gathered in her eyes. "You won't have to, baby. I promise." It was a promise he had no idea if he could keep, a promise that might shatter Monday morning when Judge Victor Bradford looked at financial statements and work schedules and decided that money mattered more than presence. But he held her until her breathing evened out again, until sleep pulled her back under, until he could carefully carry her to her small bedroom and tuck her into a bed he'd assembled from IKEA with instructions he could barely follow. The room was tiny, barely fit the bed and dresser, but Carter had made it special. Painted the walls yellow because Lily said it was a happy color. Built a bookshelf from scrap wood because new furniture wasn't in the budget. Hung curtains Nancy had sewn, covered in butterflies and flowers. This room held more love than money could buy. But would a judge see that? Or would he see peeling paint and a handmade bookshelf and curtains from a neighbor instead of a decorator? Carter pulled Lily's door almost closed, leaving it cracked the way she liked. He moved through the apartment on autopilot, locked the front door, turned off lights, checked that tomorrow's work clothes were ready. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Brian Foster. "We need to talk before Monday. Can you come to my office Saturday at 10? Carter typed back, "I'll be there." He should sleep. Should try to get a few hours before morning came and responsibilities piled back on. But his mind wouldn't settle, kept circling back to Sophia and Claire's words about their father, about money not fixing loneliness, about choosing presence over providing. Carter moved to Lily's room again, standing in the doorway and watching her sleep. This was what mattered. This small person who trusted him completely, who drew pictures of them together, who'd never once complained about their cramped apartment or second-hand clothes or the fact that her father worked himself to exhaustion. She just wanted him there. And he would be. No matter what Monday brought, no matter what Judge Victor Bradford decided, Carter would fight with everything he had to stay in this little girl's life, even if everything he had wasn't enough. The rain had finally started to ease, the hurricane downgrading to tropical storm as it moved inland. Carter stood at his daughter's doorway, wet clothes clinging to his skin, exhaustion pulling at his bones, and made a silent vow to the universe or God or whatever force controlled these things. Give me Monday. Give me a chance to prove that love counts for something, that showing up matters more than showing off, that this child deserves her father, even if her father can't afford the things her mother's parents can buy. Just give me a fighting chance. Thunder rumbled in the distance, already fading. The storm was passing. Monday was coming. And Carter Hayes had 71 hours left to prepare for the most important battle of his life. Saturday morning arrived with deceptive sunshine, the kind that followed storms and pretended the world hadn't just been drowning. Carter woke to Lily's weight on his chest, her small hand patting his face. "Daddy, you forgot to change clothes." He blinked at the ceiling, realizing he'd fallen asleep in yesterday's damp work shirt. His neck ached from the angle against the couch arm. "What time is it?" "The big hand is on the 12, and the little hand is on the 8. 8 o'clock, 2 hours before he had to meet Brian Foster. Carter sat up carefully, Lily sliding into his lap. Through the window, Tampa looked scrubbed clean, puddles reflecting blue sky like nothing had happened. "Want pancakes?" The question came automatically, part of their Saturday ritual. Lily's face lit up. "Can I stir?" "Always." They moved to the kitchen together,
Lily dragging her step stool to the counter while Carter pulled out the Bisquick box. The familiar routine settled something in his chest. Measuring cups, the satisfying crack of eggs, Lily's careful stirring that sent flour dust into the air and covered her pajamas. Not too fast or it gets lumpy. I know, Daddy. She stuck her tongue out in concentration, the same expression she made when drawing. Carter watched her stir, this small person who'd somehow become his entire world. In 48 hours, a stranger in a black robe would decide if moments like this got to continue. If Saturday morning pancakes and flour-covered pajamas mattered more than square footage and salary. The first pancake hit the griddle with a hiss. Lily abandoned her stirring to watch it bubble. Daddy, can we go to the park after breakfast? I have to meet with Mr. Foster this morning, remember? My lawyer? Her face fell. About Monday? Yeah, baby. About Monday. Carter flipped the pancake, golden brown and perfect. But after that, we'll go. Just you and me. Promise? Promise. They ate at the small table, Lily drowning her pancakes in syrup while Carter picked at his own. His stomach had been unreliable for weeks, anxiety killing appetite until food tasted like cardboard. But he forced himself to eat, because Lily was watching, because she needed to see Daddy was okay, even when nothing felt okay. Lily, listen. When I go see Mr. Foster, you'll stay with Mrs. Davis. I know. And Monday, you won't come to court with me. You'll stay home. Lily set down her fork. Why can't I come? It's not a place for kids. But it's about me. Her voice carried logic that gutted him. Shouldn't I tell the judge I want to stay with you? Carter's throat closed. He reached across the table, taking her syrup-sticky hand. You don't have to do that. The judge will make the right decision. But what if he doesn't know? What if nobody tells him I'm happy here? Baby, I am happy, Daddy. I don't want a bigger house or more toys. I want you. The words cracked something in Carter's chest. He pulled Lily from her chair into his lap, holding her against his heart. She smelled like syrup and sleep and everything good in his life. I know, sweetheart. I know. Then why does Mommy want to take me away? How did you explain addiction to a 6-year-old? How did you make her understand that Jess's sickness had nothing to do with Lily being lovable or wanted? That sometimes broken people broke everything around them, even their own children. Mommy made some mistakes, but she loves you. If she loves me, why did she leave? Carter had no answer that wouldn't damage either Jess or Lily's ability to trust people, so he just held her tighter and let the question dissolve into silence. Nancy Miller knocked at 9:30, arriving with her knitting bag and the patience of someone who'd raised 4 children and buried 1 husband. She took one look at Carter's face and shooed him toward the door. Go on. Lily and I will be just fine. The legal aid office occupied the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. Water-stained ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical illness, the smell of old coffee and older dreams. Carter found Brian Foster in a windowless conference room surrounded by folders that spilled across a table scarred with initials and coffee rings. Brian looked up, exhaustion written in the lines around his eyes. 45 years old and already going gray, wearing a suit that had been nice once but now showed wear at the elbows and collar. A good man doing impossible work for people who couldn't afford better. Carter, sit. The chair scraped against linoleum. Carter sat, hands clasped on the table, and waited for whatever bomb Brian was about to drop. I'll be straight with you. This isn't good. Brian opened the top folder, revealing photographs. Carter's apartment building, the cracked parking lot, the rusted railings.
Interior shots that made the small rooms look even smaller. The worn couch, the secondhand furniture, the kitchen with its peeling linoleum. Michelson has all of this. He'll present it Monday as evidence of inadequate living conditions. It's not inadequate. It's clean. It's safe. I know. Brian held up a hand. But look at it through a judge's eyes. Compare it to what Jess can offer. He pulled out more photos. A high-rise building in Hyde Park, all glass and steel. An apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, hardwood floors, furnished like a magazine spread. Her parents are paying for this. 2 bedrooms, 1,400 square feet. They've already hired an interior decorator for what they're calling Lily's room. Carter stared at the images, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. She doesn't even have Lily yet, and she's decorating a room? It plays well in court, shows planning, preparation, commitment to providing a stable environment. It shows money. Bitterness leaked into Carter's voice. That's all it shows. Ryan pulled out another folder. Michelson also has your work schedules for the past 6 months. 70 to 75 hours a week, Carter. He's going to argue you're never home, that Lily spends more time with Nancy Miller than with you. Because I'm working to support her. I know, but what am I supposed to do, Brian? Cut my hours and not make rent? Choose between keeping a roof over her head and being there for bedtime? Carter's voice rose, frustration and fear combining into something that tasted like acid. There's no winning. If I work less, I can't afford to keep her. If I work more, I'm not present enough. So what the hell am I supposed to do? Brian let the outburst settle before speaking again, his voice quiet and steady. We focus on what we have. Teacher testimonials. Ms. Anderson says you've never missed a parent-teacher conference. Nancy's affidavit about your dedication. Lily's school records showing she's thriving, happy, well-adjusted. Is it enough? I don't know. Honesty, at least. Michelson is good at his job. He'll make Jess look like a recovering saint who's overcome adversity. He'll make you look like a struggling single father who can't provide adequately. Carter's head dropped into his hands. 48 hours. 48 hours until his entire world got decided by someone who'd never met him, never seen him with Lily, never witnessed the 1,000 small moments that made them a family. There's something else. Brian's tone shifted, carrying a weight that made Carter look up. Jess has a new sponsor, financial backer. Her parents, not just them. Robert Preston, her father, put up a $50,000 retainer for Michelson. Cash. Up front. The number hit like a physical blow. $50,000. More than Carter made in 18 months of killing himself across 2 jobs. Enough to buy the kind of legal representation that never lost custody cases. So I'm fucked. You're outgunned. Different thing. Brian closed the folders, stacking them carefully. Who's your judge? Carter tried to remember what Brian had mentioned earlier in the week. The name had slipped through the cracks of his exhausted mind. You told me. I don't remember. Victor Bradford. Something about the name tickled at Carter's memory, but he couldn't place it. Is that good or bad? Neither. He's tough but fair. Doesn't get influenced by money or status. He'll look at the facts, the evidence, what's actually best for Lily. Brian leaned forward. That's good for us. We have the relationship, the bond. Jess has money, but no history of being present. She has sobriety documentation, though, right? Proof she's been clean? 9 months, NA meetings, counseling, the whole program. Brian's expression showed what he thought of 9 months against 2 years of abandonment. It's something, but it's not enough to erase what happened. Carter wanted to believe that. Wanted to trust that a judge would see through Jess's manufactured redemption to the truth underneath. that she was fighting for Lily because her parents demanded it, not because she'd suddenly discovered maternal instinct. But wanting and getting were different things. What do I need to do? Monday morning, 9 sharp. Wear that suit. Answer questions directly. Don't volunteer extra information. Let me handle Michelson. And Carter? Ryan's eyes held his. No matter what he says about you, stay calm. He's going to try to provoke you, make you look unstable or aggressive. Don't give him that. I can stay calm. I know you can. But it's going to be hard hearing someone attack your character, question your ability to parent. Brian gathered his folders. One more thing. There might be a new witness. Carter's stomach dropped. Who? I don't know yet. Michelson filed the disclosure late Friday, probably hoping we wouldn't have time to prepare. We'll find out Monday. They talked for another 30 minutes, Brian walking Carter through potential questions, likely attacks, the order of proceedings. By the time Carter left, his head was spinning with information that felt simultaneously crucial and useless. The Herman Park playground was crowded with post-storm families, parents grateful for sunshine, and exhausted children who needed to burn energy. Carter pushed Lily on the swings, watching her hair fly as she soared higher. More, Daddy! He pushed harder, her delighted shrieks cutting through the ambient noise of other kids playing. For these moments, nothing else existed. Not Monday's hearing, not Michelson's photographs, not the $50,000 retainer that bought lawyers who never lost. Just Carter and Lily, and the simple physics of a swing set. Eventually she jumped off mid-arc, landing in the mulch with a stumble that became a laugh. She ran to the slide, joining 3 other kids in a race to the top. Carter settled onto a bench, keeping her in sight while his mind wandered places it shouldn't. What would happen if he lost? Would they let him say goodbye? Would there be some terrible handoff where Lily cried and reached for him, while Jess's parents looked on with satisfaction? Would Nancy Miller have to watch another child leave her care, powerless to stop it? His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Carter almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. A woman's voice, young and uncertain. Mr. Hayes? This is Claire, from last night. The storm? Carter's brain took a moment to switch gears. Claire, hi. Is everything okay? Yes, fine. We got the car towed this morning. Everything's handled. A pause. Sophia and I, we told our father about you. About what you did. Dread formed in Carter's chest. The last thing he needed was more complications, more people knowing his business. You didn't have to do that. We wanted to. We told him about finding us in the storm, about driving us to safety, about your daughter and the custody hearing. Another pause, longer this time. He wants to meet you, before the hearing. I don't think that's a good idea. He said to tell you there's no obligation. I think we made him realize some things, about being absent, about what matters. Claire's voice carried something pleading. He's trying, Mr. Hayes, and I think meeting you might help him understand how to try better. Carter watched Lily slide down, her smile visible even from 30 feet away. Meeting a federal judge 2 days before facing a different judge in family court seemed like tempting fate. But something in Claire's voice reminded him of Lily, that need for a parent to just show up, to see them as worth the effort. When? Tonight? We could come to you, or... No. The last thing Carter needed was Claire and Sophia seeing his apartment, reporting back about the peeling paint and cramped rooms. Somewhere neutral. Coffee shop near the courthouse? Perfect. 7 o'clock? There's a place called Magnolia Cafe. Carter agreed before he could reconsider, then immediately questioned the decision as the call ended. What was he doing?
meeting with a federal judge whose daughters he'd helped. It reeked of impropriety, of trying to manufacture sympathy through connections. Except Claire had reached out to him. He hadn't asked for this. Lily ran over, breathing hard from playing.
"Daddy, I'm thirsty." They walked to the water fountain together, Lily gulping while Carter held back her hair. Simple moment, meaningless in the grand scheme of custody battles and legal warfare, but these were the moments that defined his relationship with his daughter. Being there for the small needs, the everyday requests, the mundane necessities that added up to love. Would a judge understand that? Or would he see work schedules and financial statements and miss everything that mattered? Sunday morning brought the kind of Florida heat that October sometimes forgot to pack away. Carter laid his only suit across the bed, the one he'd bought for his wedding 8 years ago, before Lily, before Jess's addiction had carved their lives into before and after. The jacket was snug across his shoulders now. 2 years of manual labor had built muscle that dress clothes weren't designed for. He tried it on, checking the mirror that hung on the back of his bedroom door. The man looking back seemed like a stranger playing dress-up. Carter Hayes didn't belong in suits. He belonged in work clothes with company logos, steel-toed boots, and calloused hands that fixed things for a living. But Monday required costumes. Nancy arrived with an iron she'd brought from her own apartment, insisting on pressing the shirt and pants until they looked almost new. She worked in Carter's living room while Lily colored at the table, humming something off-key and beautiful. "Honey, you're going to be fine." Carter wanted to believe her, wanted to have the faith that seemed to come so easily to Nancy, that certainty that God or the universe or simple justice would prevail. But he'd seen too much of the world to trust in fairness. What if I'm not? What if the judge looks at my bank account and Jess's trust fund and decides money wins? Nancy set the iron down, fixing him with eyes that had witnessed enough of life to know there were no guarantees. "Then you appeal. You fight. You don't give up on that little girl." She nodded toward Lily. "But I don't think it's going to come to that." "Why not?" "Because that child is happy. Any fool can see it." And judges aren't fools. Carter hoped she was right, hoped that happiness counted for more than hardwood floors and granite countertops, that love could outweigh financial statements. But hope felt dangerous when you had everything to lose. The afternoon stretched long and anxious. Carter tried to eat but couldn't, tried to focus on anything other than tomorrow but failed. His mind kept circling back to the courtroom he'd never seen, the judge he'd never met, the moment when someone else would decide his daughter's fate. At 6:30, he kissed Lily goodbye and headed to Magnolia Cafe. The place was small and crowded, filled with the Sunday dinner rush. Carter found a corner booth and ordered coffee he didn't want, nursing it while watching the door. Claire and Sophia arrived at 7 sharp, followed by a man who could only be their father. Tall, silver-haired, late 50s, with the kind of bearing that came from years of having people stand when you entered a room. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a button-down, but carried himself like the suit was implied. Claire spotted Carter and waved, leading her father over. Up close, Victor Bradford had eyes that assessed without judging, the kind of gaze that came from decades of weighing evidence and testimony. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for meeting us." They shook hands, Victor's grip firm but not aggressive. The twins slid into the booth across from Carter, their father following. "My daughters tell me you helped them Friday night, that you stopped in a hurricane when no one else would." Carter shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't anything special. They needed help." "It was special to them." Victor's eyes moved to his daughters, something complicated passing across his features. "They said you have a daughter. Lily?" "Yes. They also said you're facing a custody hearing tomorrow."
Heat crept up Carter's neck. This was a mistake. Meeting with a federal judge, discussing his case, letting these strangers into his problems. I shouldn't be talking about this. You're not in my court, Victor pointed out gently. And I'm not here as a judge. I'm here as a father who's been doing everything wrong, talking to a father who seems to be doing everything right.
The statement surprised Carter enough that he looked up, meeting Victor's eyes directly. My daughters told me about your conversation Friday night, about working 2 jobs to support Lily, about showing up even when you're exhausted. Victor's voice carried something that might have been shame. They compared you to me, found me wanting. Sophia reached for her father's hand. Dad? It's true. Victor didn't pull away from his daughter's touch, but he kept his attention on Carter. I've spent 20 years building a career, telling myself that providing for them was enough, that they understood why I missed recitals and graduations and regular Tuesday dinners. We didn't understand, Claire said softly. We just learned to expect it. The pain in Victor's expression felt familiar. Carter recognized it from every time he'd had to leave Lily with Nancy to work a double shift, every parent-teacher conference he'd arrived late to, every bedtime story he'd missed because exhaustion had dragged him under. You work 2 jobs, Victor continued. You could use that as an excuse to be absent. But from what my daughters tell me, you're still there for Lily in all the ways that matter. I try to be. That's more than most people do. Victor leaned back, something contemplative in his posture. What does your lawyer say about tomorrow? That I'm outgunned, but not out of the fight? Carter heard himself talking, sharing details he probably shouldn't with a stranger. But there was something about Victor that invited honesty. Maybe the judicial training that made confession feel natural. My ex-wife's parents hired Kenneth Pierce, $50,000 retainer. Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. Michelson doesn't lose custody cases. I know. But he's also a bully who relies on intimidation over substance. If you have the relationship with your daughter, the documented presence, Michelson's money won't matter. A pause. Who's your judge? Victor Bradford. The name hung in the air for 3 beats before Carter's brain made the connection. His eyes widened. Wait, you're... Federal court, not family court. Different jurisdiction. Victor held his gaze. But yes, I'm Victor Bradford. Ice water dumped through Carter's veins. He'd just spent 15 minutes discussing his custody case with a judge named Hartwell, never making the connection, never realizing that the absent father these girls had described was the same name Brian Foster had mentioned. I should go. Carter started to slide out of the booth. Mr. Hayes, wait. Victor's voice carried authority that stopped Carter mid-movement. I'm not your judge tomorrow. I have no connection to your case. This conversation is completely separate from your hearing. It doesn't look separate. It looks like I'm trying to... Carter couldn't even finish the sentence, the implications too ugly. You're trying to have coffee with 2 girls you helped, and their father who asked to meet you. Victor's tone gentled. There's no impropriety here. You didn't seek this meeting. You didn't know who I was, and tomorrow you'll face a completely different judge who knows nothing about this conversation. Carter's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that he needed to leave before it became something that could hurt him in court. But Claire's eyes were pleading, and Sophia looked like she might cry, and Victor Bradford seemed like a man genuinely trying to learn something from someone who had no business teaching a federal judge anything. Slowly, Carter settled back into the booth. They talked for another hour. Victor asked questions about Lily, what she liked to do, how Carter balanced work and parenting, what a typical day looked like. Carter answered, finding himself relaxing despite the surreal situation. Victor listened without interrupting,
something Carter suspected wasn't natural for someone used to running courtrooms.
The twins added commentary, telling their father about Carter's obvious love for Lily, the way his whole face changed when he talked about her.
"That's how you should look when you talk about us," Claire said to her father.
Victor absorbed the criticism without defensiveness. "You're right. I should." As they prepared to leave, Victor pulled out his phone. "I have a friend who runs a commercial HVAC company, John Miller. They're looking for a supervisor, someone with experience and technical knowledge." Carter stiffened. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. It's a job opening. But I understand if you'd rather not." "I appreciate it, but no." Carter stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "I need to get home to Lily." He left money for his untouched coffee and walked out into the warm Sunday evening, his mind spinning. Meeting Victor Bradford felt like either the best or worst thing that could have happened 2 days before his hearing. He had no idea which. Monday morning arrived with the weight of execution day. Carter woke before his alarm, stomach churning. He showered, shaved carefully, put on the freshly pressed suit that Nancy had made respectable. Lily was already awake when he emerged from the bathroom, sitting on the couch in her pajamas and watching cartoons on mute.
"You look fancy, Daddy."
He sat beside her, pulling her close. "Daddy has to go to that important place we talked about, remember?"
"Court."
"Yeah. Mrs. Davis will be here soon. You'll stay home today, okay?" Lily nodded against his shoulder.
"Will you come back?"
The question pierced his chest. "Of course I'll come back."
"Promise?"
"I promise, baby girl. Daddy always comes back."
Nancy arrived at 8, shooing Carter toward the door with the same eternal authority she'd wielded Saturday.
"Go on. The Lord is with you." The drive downtown happened in a blur. Carter found parking 3 blocks from the courthouse, fed the meter with quarters he'd been saving, and walked toward the building that held his future. Harris County Family Court occupied floors 3 through 7 of a building that had been modern in the 70s. Carter rode the elevator to the 4th floor, following signs to Courtroom 4B. Brian Foster waited outside, suit slightly rumpled, briefcase clutched like a shield. "You ready?" "No." "Good. That means you understand what's at stake." Brian guided him to a bench. "Jess will be here with Michelson and probably her parents. Don't engage, don't react, just get through this." 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Jessica Bennett stepped out. Carter hadn't seen her in 6 months, not since the last supervised visitation that she'd missed. She looked different, healthier, cleaner, put together in a way that money enabled. Her blonde hair was professionally styled, makeup subtle, suit probably worth more than Carter's monthly rent. Behind her came Robert and Patricia Preston, old Tampa money in human form. Robert wore a Brooks Brothers suit, silver hair immaculate, expression carved from contempt. Patricia matched him in coldness, her designer clothes and perfect posture screaming superiority. And beside them, Kenneth Pierce, late 50s, shark eyes, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Carter's car. Jess's eyes found Carter across the hallway. Something flickered in her expression, regret, maybe, or residual affection for the man she'd married before drugs had destroyed their lives. But then Robert said something low and sharp, and Jess's face smoothed into neutrality. Michelson approached Brian, offering a handshake that was all professional courtesy with an undercurrent of predatory confidence. "Grant, shall we get started?" A bailiff emerged from the courtroom, calling them inside. Carter followed Brian through heavy wooden doors into a space that smelled like old paper and broken families. The courtroom was smaller than Carter had imagined, wood paneling that had darkened with age, fluorescent lights that hummed overhead.
the Florida and American flags flanking a bench that sat empty and waiting. Brian directed Carter to the defendant's table. Scarred wood, metal chairs, a water pitcher that had seen better decades. Across the aisle, Michelson settled Jess and her parents at the plaintiff's table, newer and somehow more polished. The bailiff positioned himself near the bench.
All rise, the Honorable Judge Victor Bradford presiding. Carter's world tilted sideways. He started to stand with everyone else, moving on autopilot while his brain short-circuited. Number. Not possible. Different Hartwell. Had to be different. The door behind the bench opened, and Victor Bradford walked in, black robe replacing last night's casual clothes, reading glasses on a chain, silver hair catching the overhead lights. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Recognition flashed in Victor's expression, quickly suppressed. He took his seat, face settling into professional neutrality as he opened the file in front of him. Carter couldn't breathe, couldn't process. The father who'd bought him coffee 12 hours ago was the judge who'd decide his daughter's fate. Brian leaned close, whispering urgently, "Did you know?" Carter shook his head, incapable of speech. Victor's voice filled the courtroom, steady and authoritative. "Good morning. We're here for Hayes versus Bennett, custody hearing regarding minor child Lily Morrison, age 6. His eyes moved across the room without lingering on Carter. "Counsels, state your appearances." Michelson stood smoothly. "Kenneth Pierce for petitioner Jessica Bennett, Your Honor." Brian rose, slightly less smooth. "Brian Foster for respondent Carter Hayes, Your Honor." Victor reviewed the file silently, pages turning with deliberate care. The courtroom held its collective breath. This case was originally scheduled for Judge Patterson, transferred to my docket Friday due to Judge Patterson's medical leave. Victor looked up, meeting Carter's eyes for one loaded second. "Before we proceed, I need to ask, do either party have any objection to me presiding?" Michelson stood immediately. "No objection, Your Honor." Jess nodded her agreement. Brian looked at Carter, question clear in his expression. Carter's mind raced through implications, possibilities, the massive conflict of interest that sat on the bench wearing a black robe. Victor could recuse himself, should recuse himself. This entire situation was improper at best, grounds for mistrial at worst. But Victor had listened last night, had understood in ways Carter suspected most judges wouldn't, had seen past financial statements to what actually mattered. Brian whispered again, "Say the word and we request recusal. New judge, clean slate." Carter thought of Lily drawing pictures of them together, of Saturday morning pancakes and bedtime stories, of 2 years of showing up while Jess's parents threw money at lawyers. He stood. "No objection, Your Honor." Brian's shock was visible but silent. Across the aisle, Robert Preston leaned forward, sensing something wrong but unable to identify what. Victor studied Carter for a long moment. "Mr. Hayes, are you certain? You have the right to an impartial judge." "I'm certain, Your Honor." "Very well." Victor set down his pen. "Before we hear opening statements, I'm calling a 15-minute recess." Michelson rose immediately. "Your Honor, we just started." 15 minutes, Counselor." Victor's tone allowed no argument. His gavel came down. "Bailiff, Mr. Hayes and counsel, please see me in chambers." The courtroom erupted in whispered confusion. Robert Preston stood, face reddening. Jess looked between her lawyer and her parents, lost. Carter followed the bailiff through a side door, Brian gripping his elbow with barely contained panic. "What the hell is happening? How do you know Judge Bradford?" "Friday night. The storm. The girls I helped were his daughters." Brian stopped walking, face draining of color.
Oh my God. Carter, this could destroy us. If Michelson finds out. The judge is about to tell us himself. Carter kept moving, following the bailiff down a narrow corridor.
Bear's chambers looked exactly like chambers should. Wall of law books, wooden desk worn by decades of use, family photos scattered among legal texts. Victor stood by the window, still wearing his robe, hands clasped behind his back. The bailiff withdrew, closing the door. Victor turned to face them. Mr. Foster, I need to disclose something to you and your client. His voice was formal, careful. Friday night, my daughters experienced car trouble during the storm. They were stranded on Interstate 75 for over an hour. Mr. Hayes stopped and helped them when no one else would. Brian sank into a chair without being invited. This is a disaster. It's a complication, Victor corrected. One I'm disclosing fully and publicly. You have to recuse. Ryan looked at Carter, then Victor. There's no way around this. The conflict is too clear. I can recuse, or both parties can waive the conflict and we proceed. Victor moved to his desk, sitting on the edge. Mr. Hayes, I'm telling you this privately first, because I want you to understand what you're agreeing to if you waive. I already said I have no objection. You said that without knowing the full situation. Now you do. Victor's eyes were steady. My daughters told me about your conversation Friday night. About Lily, about this custody battle. They told me the kind of father they wish they'd had. The words hung heavy. Ryan looked between them, understanding dawning. That creates bias, Victor continued. Not because I owe you, I don't, but because I respect you. And respect can influence judgment as much as debt. He paused. So I'm giving you a choice. I can recuse myself and a new judge will be assigned. Or you can waive the conflict, understanding that I will scrutinize this case with absolute rigor to avoid any appearance of favoritism. Brian found his voice. Your Honor, I have to advise my client that recusal might be safer. I waive the conflict. Carter's voice came firm, certain. Carter, I trust Judge Bradford to be fair, more than I'd trust someone who doesn't understand what it means to be a present father. Victor's expression softened fractionally. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate that trust. But you need to understand that if we proceed, I will hold both sides to the highest standard. I will not give you preferential treatment. If the evidence supports Miss Bennett's petition, I will rule accordingly. I know. Then we'll return to the courtroom, and I'll disclose this conflict publicly. Mr. Michelson will likely object, demand recusal. The decision to proceed or not will ultimately rest with both parties. Victor stood. And if we proceed, expect this case to be scrutinized more carefully than any custody hearing you've witnessed, Mr. Foster. They filed back into the courtroom, Carter's heart hammering against his ribs. This was either the best decision he'd ever made, or the catastrophic error that would cost him everything. Victor took his seat, waiting for silence before speaking. Before we proceed, I need to disclose a conflict of interest that has arisen. The courtroom went still. Michelson straightened, scenting blood. Friday night, during Tropical Storm Elena, my daughters experienced car trouble on Interstate 75. Mr. Hayes stopped and assisted them when no one else would. I wasn't aware of this until Sunday evening. Michelson shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. I'm aware, Counselor, which is why I'm disclosing it publicly and offering both parties the opportunity to object to my presiding. Robert Preston leaned forward, whispering urgently to Michelson. Jess's face had gone pale. Michelson's voice carried outrage. Your Honor, this is a clear conflict of interest. You have a personal relationship with the respondent. I have gratitude toward the respondent for helping my daughters.
That's different than a relationship. Victor's tone stayed level. And I'm prepared to recuse if either party requests. But I'm also prepared to proceed if both parties waive the conflict. We don't waive, Michelson stated flatly. We request immediate recusal. All eyes turned to Brian, who looked at Carter with an expression that begged him to reconsider. Carter stood anyway. Your Honor, I waive the conflict of interest. Michelson spun toward him. Your Honor, the respondent doesn't understand. Mr. Michelson, Mr. Hayes has competent counsel. I'm confident he understands perfectly. Victor looked at Carter. Mr. Hayes, are you absolutely certain? You have the right to a judge with no connection to you whatsoever. I'm certain, Your Honor. Victor nodded slowly, then turned his attention to the other table. Miss Bennett, this is your decision, not your parents', not your attorney's. Do you waive the conflict or request recusal? Michelson bent down, whispering fiercely. Robert Preston's face had gone red, his mouth moving in what was clearly urgent instruction. Jess listened to both men, then stood. I waive the conflict, Your Honor. Ms. Bennett, Michelson's professional composure cracked slightly. I said I waive it. Jess's voice carried more strength than Carter had heard from her in years. Robert Preston stood abruptly. Your Honor, my daughter doesn't understand the implications. Victor's expression went cold. Mr. Preston, you are not a party to this case. If you interrupt these proceedings again, I will hold you in contempt and have you removed from my courtroom. Am I clear? Robert sat, fury radiating from every line of his body. Both parties have waived the conflict. Victor's gavel came down. This case will proceed. However, given the unusual circumstances, I'm ordering an additional home study. Dr. Lisa Morgan will conduct independent evaluations of both residences. Reports due Thursday morning. We'll reconvene at 9 a.m. Thursday to hear findings and proceed with testimony. Carter's stomach dropped. Home study. They'd see his cramped apartment, compare it to Jess's Hyde Park high-rise, document every way his poverty looked inadequate next to her parents' money. Victor continued. Dr. Morgan will contact both parties to schedule visits. This hearing is recessed until Thursday. The gavel fell again. The courtroom emptied slowly, people processing what had just happened. Carter stood on shaking legs, Brian gathering papers with mechanical efficiency. Jess approached, her parents and Michelson trailing like angry shadows. Carter, can we talk? I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just 1 minute. Brian stepped between them. Ms. Bennett, anything you need to say can go through your attorney. But Jess looked past Brian to Carter, her eyes carrying something that might have been genuine remorse. Thank you for waiving the conflict. I didn't do it for you. I know, but still. Thank you. Robert Preston grabbed Jess's arm, pulling her away before Carter could respond. Michelson shot a look that promised future warfare, then followed his clients from the courtroom. Brian waited until they were alone before turning on Carter. That was the biggest gamble I've ever seen in family court. It felt right. Right doesn't always win. And now we have a home study, which is... Brian stopped, running a hand through his hair. Carter, they're going to see your apartment. Compare it to what Jess can offer. The optics are terrible. So we show them what matters. That Lily is happy, healthy, loved. I hope that's enough. Brian didn't sound convinced. Carter left the courthouse in a daze, the morning's events playing on loop. He'd just waived a conflict of interest with a judge who'd had coffee with him 12 hours before the hearing, had trusted Victor Bradford to see past money to what mattered. He'd either made the smartest move of his life or handed Jess everything she needed to destroy him. His phone buzzed as he reached his car. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Hayes, this is Dr. Lisa Morgan.
I'll be conducting the court-ordered home study. Available tomorrow at 2 p.m. for your residence? Please confirm." Carter stared at the message, then at his car's reflection in the courthouse windows. Tomorrow. They'd evaluate his life tomorrow and decide if it was good enough. He typed back, "Confirmed, 2 p.m. Then he drove home to tell his daughter that nothing was decided yet, that they had to wait longer, that strangers would come judge whether their small apartment and secondhand furniture measured up to what a child deserved. Nancy met him at the door, reading his expression. "What happened?" "The judge is the father of the girls I helped Friday night." Her eyes widened. "Sweet Lord." I waived the conflict, told them I wanted him to hear the case anyway. "Honey, they're doing a home study. Tomorrow at 2. Someone's coming to inspect whether I'm fit to keep my own daughter." Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. "Daddy, you came back." Carter swept her into his arms, holding her like she might evaporate. "Always, baby girl. Daddy always comes back." But for how much longer remained an open question. Dr. Lisa Morgan arrived at Carter's apartment at precisely 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon, clipboard in hand and camera bag slung over her shoulder. Professional suit, kind eyes, the expression of someone who'd seen enough broken families to know judgment helped nobody. Carter had spent the morning cleaning obsessively, scrubbing baseboards that hadn't been touched in months, organizing Lily's toys into neat arrangements that lasted approximately 5 minutes after she woke up. The apartment still looked like what it was, small, worn, home to people who counted pennies, but at least it was clean. Lily hid behind Carter's leg when he opened the door, her usual confidence evaporating in the presence of this stranger who'd come to measure their worthiness. "Mr. Hayes, and you must be Lily." Dr. Morgan knelt to the girl's eye level, movement slow and non-threatening. "I'm Dr. Morgan. I just want to talk with you for a little while. Is that okay?" Lily looked up at Carter for permission. He nodded, trying to keep his expression calm, even though panic clawed at his throat. Dr. Morgan rose, taking in the apartment with a sweep that seemed casual but missed nothing. The worn couch that sagged in the middle, the television that predated flat screens, the kitchen visible from the living room, linoleum peeling at the edges where moisture had gotten underneath. "May I look around?" "Of course." Carter stepped back, letting her move through his life. She paused at the coffee table where Lily's latest drawing sat, 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. "Daddy and me forever," scrawled across the top in careful letters. Dr. Morgan made a note without comment. The kitchen inspection was thorough. She opened the refrigerator, Frank Turner's groceries from yesterday still fresh, milk and eggs and vegetables that Carter couldn't normally afford all at once. Checked the pantry where cereal boxes and pasta and canned goods lined up in rows. Made notes on her clipboard. "Do you cook for Lily every day?" "Yes, ma'am. Breakfast before school, dinner every night." Carter's voice came steadier than he felt. "Weekends we make pancakes together. It's our tradition." "Does Lily help cook?" "She stirs the batter, gets more on herself than in the bowl usually." Lily giggled from behind his leg, peeking out at Dr. Morgan with slightly less fear. The bedroom evaluation took longest. Dr. Morgan spent 15 minutes in Lily's small room, photographing every detail. The yellow walls Carter had painted himself, working late nights while Lily slept at Nancy's apartment. The bookshelf cobbled together from pallet wood he'd salvaged and sanded smooth. The bed with its princess comforter, last year's Christmas present that had required skipping 2 of his own meals to afford. She picked up a worn copy of The Giving Tree, pages soft from repeated readings. "Is this Lily's favorite book?" "One of them.
We read together every night before bed. More notes, more photographs. Dr. Morgan examined the drawings taped to every available wall surface, Lily's artwork chronicling their life together. Daddy and me at the park, Daddy teaching me to ride my bike. Our family, which included Carter, Lily, and Nancy Miller, but notably excluded Jess. Lily, where's Mommy in your pictures? The question came gentle, but Lily's body tensed against Carter's leg. Mommy's not there. Just Daddy and me. Dr. Morgan absorbed this without reaction, making another note that Carter couldn't read from his angle. Mr. Hayes, I'd like to speak with Lily privately now. Would you mind waiting in the living room? Every instinct screamed to refuse, to protect his daughter from questions that might hurt or confuse her, but refusing would look worse than whatever Lily might say. He knelt beside his daughter. Baby, is it okay if you talk to Dr. Morgan alone? Daddy will be right outside the door. Lily's fingers tightened on his shirt. You won't leave? Never. I'll be 10 feet away. She released him slowly, watching as he backed out of her room. Dr. Morgan closed the door to a crack. Carter could hear murmured voices, but not distinct words. He stood in the hallway, hands clenched into fists, counting his own heartbeats. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Through the gap in the door, he caught fragments. Do you like living here? Lily's voice, small but certain. Yes, this is my home. Would you like a bigger house? A pause that stretched Carter's nerves taut. Then Lily, confused. Why? This is just right for Daddy and me. Do you miss Mommy? Another pause, longer. Carter stopped breathing. Sometimes. But Mommy went away a long time ago. Mommy left when I needed her. Daddy never leaves. Something in Carter's chest cracked open. He pressed his palm against the wall, steadying himself. The door opened fully. Dr. Morgan emerged, Lily trailing behind and immediately reaching for Carter's hand. The evaluator's expression revealed nothing. Thank you both. I have what I need here. She moved toward the front door, pausing before leaving. Mr. Hayes, a home isn't defined by square footage. Remember that. Then she was gone, leaving Carter and Lily standing in their small apartment while the weight of judgment settled over everything. Wednesday morning, Carter received Dr. Morgan's report via email from Brian Foster. He read it 3 times on his phone, standing in the parking lot of Frank's shop before his shift started, the Florida sun beating down on concrete that radiated yesterday's heat. The summary section hit him in waves. Morrison residence. Small, 680 square feet, but well-maintained, safe, child-appropriate. Child's room demonstrates significant parental investment and attention to child's needs. Evidence of stable routine, nutritional meals, educational engagement. Preston residence. Spacious, 1,400 square feet. Well-appointed, but lacks personalization for child. No evidence of preparation for child's daily needs. No toys, books, or items suggesting child's presence. The interview assessments were even more damning for Jess. Minor child, Lily, age 6. Articulate, well-adjusted, demonstrates strong attachment to father, expresses clear preference to remain with father, shows no signs of distress, neglect, or inadequate care. Petitioner, S. Preston, demonstrates surface-level knowledge of child's current needs and preferences, appears motivated by external pressures rather than intrinsic desire for parenting, lacks detailed understanding of child's daily routine, interests, or developmental needs. And then the recommendation that made Carter's hands shake. Primary physical custody should remain with respondent Carter Hayes. Petitioner Jessica Bennett may have supervised visitation rights pending continued sobriety verification and completion of parenting classes. Brian's text came through as Carter finished reading. This is good. Really good. But don't celebrate yet.
Michelson will fight this hard. Carter called him back, voice tight. What happens Thursday? Judge Bradford will review the report publicly. Michelson can challenge it, but Dr. Morgan's evaluations are respected. If the judge accepts her recommendation, Brian let the possibility hang. Then I keep Lily. Then the evidence strongly supports you keeping Lily. But we still have to get through Michelson's cross-examination, Jess's testimony, all of it. Thursday morning arrived, wrapped in the kind of autumn clarity that made Tampa almost beautiful. Carter dressed in his suit again, the fabric already familiar from Monday's disaster. Lily watched from her bed, covers pulled up to her chin. Daddy, will you know today? He sat beside her, smoothing her hair. Maybe, baby. The judge might decide today, or he might need more time. I want to stay with you. I know, sweetheart. And Daddy's going to do everything possible to make that happen. Nancy arrived early, shooing Carter out the door with a prayer and a firm hug. The drive downtown passed in a blur of catastrophic scenarios. Michelson destroying Dr. Morgan's credibility. Victor deciding the conflict was too great after all. Jess's parents producing some witness who'd swear Carter was unfit. The courthouse lobby was already crowded when Carter arrived, people streaming toward elevators that moved with bureaucratic indifference. He rode to the 4th floor alone, emerging into the hallway where Brian waited with an expression somewhere between hopeful and terrified. Michelson's here. He looks ready to burn the building down. That good? For us, maybe. Desperate lawyers make mistakes. Brian adjusted his tie, a nervous habit Carter had noticed Monday. But desperate lawyers also take risks. Be ready for anything. They entered the courtroom to find Jess already seated with Michelson and her parents. Robert Preston's jaw was set in a line that promised violence, if only violence were legal in family court. Patricia stared straight ahead, ice in designer clothing. Jess looked small between them, diminished by their fury. Michelson's eyes tracked Carter across the room, calculating and cold. Vare entered at 9 sharp, black robe settling around him like authority-made fabric. His eyes swept the courtroom with practiced neutrality, landing on Carter for 1 microsecond before moving on. We're here to review Dr. Morgan's home study report. Counselors, you've both received copies? Yes, Your Honor. Michelson stood, papers rustling. And we have significant concerns about the methodology and conclusions. You'll have opportunity to address those concerns, Mr. Michelson. First, I want to hear from Dr. Morgan herself. Victor nodded to the bailiff. Dr. Lisa Morgan entered from a side door, taking the witness stand with the ease of someone who'd testified hundreds of times. She swore her oath, settled into the chair, and met Victor's gaze with professional composure. Dr. Morgan, please summarize your findings for the court. She opened her own copy of the report, though Carter suspected she'd memorized every word. I conducted home visits to both residences Tuesday. At Mr. Hayes's apartment, I found a small but well-maintained living space. The child's room showed significant evidence of parental involvement. Custom paintwork, handmade furniture, age-appropriate books and toys. The refrigerator and pantry were well stocked with nutritious food. Most importantly, the child showed strong attachment to the space and to her father. Michelson shifted in his chair, coiled tension looking for release. At Miss Bennett's apartment, I found a spacious, professionally furnished residence. However, the designated child's room was essentially empty. New furniture still tagged, no personalization, no evidence that actual preparation for daily childcare had occurred. And your interviews? Lily Morrison is a well-adjusted 6-year-old who demonstrates secure attachment to her father. She was articulate about her daily routine, her relationship with Mr. Hayes, and her feelings about her living situation. She expressed clear preference to remain with her father. Dr. Morgan's tone stayed clinical, but Carter heard what she wasn't saying directly, that Lily was thriving in ways children with unstable parents didn't. Miss Bennett presented well, but showed limited knowledge of her daughter's current life. She couldn't name Lily's favorite book, current teacher, or close friends. She referred to hypothetical future arrangements rather than demonstrating understanding of actual child-rearing needs. Victor made notes, face unreadable. And your recommendation? Primary custody should remain with Mr. Hayes. He has demonstrated consistent, engaged parenting over 2 years. The child is thriving in his care. Ms. Bennett should have supervised visitation opportunities while she continues her recovery and completes parenting education. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Mr. Michelson, your witness. Michelson rose like a snake uncoiling, all smooth menace and calculated threat. He approached the witness stand with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Dr. Morgan, how many square feet is Mr. Hayes's apartment? Approximately 680. And Mrs. Bennett's? 1,400. More than double the space. Would you agree that a child benefits from having adequate room? Room is a factor, but not the determining factor in child welfare. But it is a factor. Michelson paced, hands clasped behind his back. And Mr. Hayes's work schedule? You reviewed that? I did. 60 to 70 hours per week, correct? That's what the record showed. Which means he's not actually present for his daughter most of the time, despite your assessment of his engagement. Dr. Morgan's expression didn't change. Quality of presence matters more than quantity of hours. Mr. Hayes's daughter showed clear evidence of secure attachment, which doesn't develop when a parent is genuinely absent. Michelson pivoted. You noted Ms. Bennett couldn't name her daughter's current teacher. Couldn't that simply reflect 6 months of separation, not lack of care? It could. Combined with other factors, it suggested surface-level engagement. Surface-level engagement, or the natural knowledge gap created by Mr. Hayes systematically excluding her from their daughter's life? Brian stood. Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. Sustained. Victor's tone carried warning. Mr. Michelson, stick to questions about the evaluation. Michelson smiled, unfazed. Dr. Morgan, did you evaluate Miss Bennett's sobriety documentation? That wasn't within the scope of my evaluation. So you don't actually know if she's maintained 9 months of continuous sobriety, attended all recommended meetings, completed her treatment program. I reviewed the documentation provided, but didn't independently verify. Yes or no, doctor? Did you verify her sobriety claims? No. And Mr. Hayes' apartment is in 3rd Ward, correct? A neighborhood with higher than average crime rates? I didn't conduct a neighborhood crime analysis, but you're aware 3rd Ward has documented safety concerns that Hyde Park does not. Dr. Morgan's patience was showing cracks. Many factors contribute to child safety. Crime statistics are one consideration among many. Michelson pressed for another 10 minutes, trying to punch holes in conclusions that were backed by 2 years of evidence versus 9 months of promises. When he finally sat down, his expression suggested he knew he'd made no real headway. Victor looked to Brian. Redirect? Just one question, Your Honor. Brian stood. Dr. Morgan, in your professional opinion, which residence showed evidence of being an actual home versus a show place? Mr. Hayes' apartment was clearly lived in and loved. Ms. Bennett's felt staged. No further questions. Victor excused Dr. Morgan, then turned to Michelson. Does the petitioner wish to present additional evidence before I make my ruling? Michelson conferred with Robert Preston in urgent whispers, the older man's face progressively darkening. Finally, Michelson stood, jaw tight. Your Honor, we request Ms. Bennett be allowed to address the court directly. You wish to put your client on the stand? We do.
Brian leaned close to Carter. This is either brilliant or suicidal.
Michelson doesn't put clients on unless he's desperate or they insist. Jess stood, movements uncertain as she approached the witness stand. The bailiff swore her in. She settled into the chair, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on some point above everyone's heads. Michelson's questioning started gentle, walking Jess through her rehab timeline, her NA meetings, her new job as an office manager at a dental practice. She answered with practiced calm, the testimony of someone who'd been coached extensively. Ms. Bennett, why are you seeking custody of your daughter? Because I'm her mother. The words came automatic, rehearsed. Mothers are always best for their children. But you relinquished custody 2 years ago. Why now? Jess's composure flickered. I was sick then. I'm better now. I deserve a second chance to be a good mother. And you believe you can provide better for Lily than Mr. Hayes? I know I can. I have a stable job, a beautiful apartment, family support. Lily would have opportunities she can't have living in a 600-square-foot apartment in 3rd Ward. Michelson nodded, satisfied. Your witness, Mr. Foster. Brian approached slowly, his earlier nervousness replaced by something sharper. Carter recognized the shift. This was Brian in his element, cross-examination where truth mattered more than polish. Miss Bennett, when did you last see Lily? 6 months ago. And before that? Jess shifted in her seat. The supervised visitation schedule was sporadic. How many scheduled visits did you attend in the year before you filed this petition? I don't recall exactly. I have the records here. Brian pulled papers from his folder. You were scheduled for 24 visits. You attended 7. Is that accurate? I was dealing with my recovery. Yes or no, Ms. Bennett? 24 scheduled, 7 attended? Yes. And on 3 of those 7 visits, you arrived intoxicated, correct? Michelson shot to his feet. Objection! Ms. Bennett completed rehab. This is character assassination. It goes to credibility, Your Honor. The petitioner claims she's a fit mother. Her past behavior is relevant. Victor nodded. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Ms. Bennett. Jess's eyes filled with tears. I was sick. I've explained this. I'm asking about facts, not explanations. 3 visits where you arrived under the influence. Yes or no? Yes. Brian let the admission hang in the air. What's Lily's favorite book? The question shift caught Jess off guard. What? Her favorite book. What does she like to read? We read lots of books. I don't remember one specifically. Who's her teacher? She's in 1st grade. The teacher's name, Ms. Bennett. I don't know. Who are her friends? Carter handles the school things. I haven't been involved. What does she like for breakfast? This is ridiculous. Jess's composure shattered. I've been in treatment. I couldn't know every detail. Ms. Bennett. Brian's voice softened to something almost gentle. These aren't details. These are the basics of your daughter's life. A life you've been absent from for 2 years. Jess's face crumpled. She pressed her hands over her eyes, shoulders shaking. Ms. Bennett, whose idea was it to file for custody? Yours or your parents'? Michelson stood again. Objection. Relevance. It's relevant to Ms. Bennett's actual motivations versus claimed motivations. I'll allow it. Victor leaned forward slightly. Answer the question, Miss Bennett. Jess lowered her hands. Mascara streaked her cheeks. When she spoke, her voice barely carried past the witness stand. My parents said, if I didn't fight, they'd cut me off. No support from my apartment, my treatment, anything. Robert Preston surged to his feet. Jacintha, be quiet. Victor's gavel came down hard.
Mr. Preston, sit down immediately or I will have you removed. Robert sat, fury radiating from every line of his body. Patricia gripped his arm, her face carved from stone. Brian pressed the advantage. So you're not seeking custody because you believe it's what's best for Lily. You're doing it because your parents demanded it.
I want to be a good mother. That's not what I asked. Are you seeking custody because your parents threatened to withdraw financial support if you didn't? The silence stretched. Jess looked at her father, at Michelson, at Carter. Tears continued falling, but she made no move to wipe them away. Yes. The word dropped like a bomb. Carter heard it but couldn't process it, couldn't believe Jess had just admitted the truth after months of manufactured custody battle.
Michelson's face went white. He started to stand, then sat back down, recognizing that trying to salvage this would only make things worse. Victor's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. Ms. Bennett, let me make sure I understand. You're seeking custody of your 6-year-old daughter, not because you believe it's in her best interest, but because your parents threatened financial consequences if you didn't. Jess nodded, then seemed to realize she needed to speak.
Yes, Your Honor. And if I told you right now that the best thing for Lily is to remain with her father, what would you do?
Jess's hands twisted in her lap. The courtroom held its collective breath.
I don't know.
The honesty of it was devastating.
I don't know what I'd do.
Victor sat back in his chair, studying Jess with an expression Carter couldn't read. When he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been disappointment. Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Bennett.
You may step down.
Jess returned to her seat on shaking legs. Robert Preston wouldn't look at her. Patricia's mouth had compressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. Victor turned to Michelson. Does the petitioner have any other witnesses? Michelson stood slowly, defeat written in every movement. No, Your Honor. Mr. Foster? Brian shook his head. The respondent rests, Your Honor. Very well. Victor folded his hands on the bench. I've reviewed Dr. Morgan's comprehensive report. I've heard testimony from both the evaluator and the petitioner. The facts are clear. Carter's heart hammered so hard, he thought it might crack his ribs. Mr. Hayes has demonstrated consistent, engaged parenting for 2 years. He's maintained stable housing, steady employment, and most importantly, a strong relationship with his daughter. The child is thriving in his care by every measurable standard. Victor's eyes moved to Jess. Ms. Bennett has been honest about her struggles and her motivations. That honesty is commendable. However, honesty doesn't change the fact that she's been largely absent from her daughter's life and appears to be seeking custody due to external pressure rather than genuine readiness for full-time parenting. Robert Preston's hands clenched into fists. Patricia stared straight ahead, rigid as carved marble. This court awards primary physical custody to Carter Hayes. Victor's voice carried the weight of finality. Jessica Bennett is granted supervised visitation rights, contingent on continued sobriety verification and completion of a court-approved parenting program. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel fell. The sound echoed through Carter's chest, through his bones, settling into the marrow where fear had lived for months. He'd won. Brian was shaking his hand, saying something Carter couldn't hear through the roaring in his ears. Across the aisle, Michelson was gathering papers with mechanical efficiency, while Robert Preston stood like a man preparing for war. Jess remained seated, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, her eyes found Carter's. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but maybe the first honest moment they'd shared since she'd chosen cocaine over their daughter. Vare had already left the bench, his robe disappearing through the door before Carter could process wanting to say thank you. The courtroom began emptying. Brian steered Carter toward the exit, still talking about next steps and visitation schedules and words that bounced off without sticking. In the hallway, Robert Preston blocked their path. His face had gone red, veins standing out at his temples. "This isn't over, Morrison." Carter met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it is."
"We'll appeal." A voice cut through Robert's bluster, calm and absolutely authoritative. Victor Bradford stood in the doorway of his chambers, no longer in his robe, just a man in a white shirt and suspenders. "Mr. Preston, if you file a frivolous appeal, I'll personally ensure it's dismissed with prejudice and recommend sanctions for harassment. Am I making myself clear?" Robert's mouth worked silently. Patricia pulled him away before he could say something that would land him in contempt. They disappeared into the elevator, leaving Jess standing alone in the hallway. She approached slowly, each step seeming to cost her. "Carter, can we talk just for a minute?" Brian started to object, but Carter touched his arm. "It's okay." They moved to a bench against the wall, sitting with careful distance between them. Jess's hands twisted in her lap, a nervous habit Carter remembered from their marriage. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving. For lying. For putting you and Lily through this. You did the right thing today, telling the truth. My parents are furious. They've probably disowned me by now." Jess's laugh came bitter and broken. "But you know what? I feel lighter than I have in months." "What will you do? Keep going to meetings? Keep working? Figure out who I am without my parents' money or their expectations?" She looked at him directly. "Can I see her sometimes? Supervised, like the judge said. I want to try to be a mother. The kind she deserves." Carter thought about Lily's drawing of their family that didn't include Jess. Thought about 2 years of bedtimes and sick days and parent-teacher conferences that Jess had missed. Thought about the woman sitting beside him who'd finally admitted she wasn't ready, but wanted to try. "We'll start small. Supervised visits. You stay clean, you show up consistently. We'll see what happens." "Thank you." Tears slipped down Jess's cheeks. "Take care of her." "Always." Jess stood, wiping her face. She walked toward the elevator without looking back. Carter watched her go, feeling something like pity mixed with relief. Victor appeared beside him, silent until Jess disappeared from view. "You're being generous, given everything she put you through." "She's Lily's mother. If she can get healthy, Lily deserves to have that relationship." Carter stood, finally facing the man who'd held his daughter's fate in his hands. "Thank you for seeing what mattered." "I saw what the evidence showed. Dr. Morgan's report was unambiguous." Victor paused. "But I'll admit, helping my daughters gave me insight I might not have had otherwise, about what it means to be present versus simply providing." "How are Sophia and Claire?" "Different. Better, I hope. We've been having dinner together." Actual dinner where I turn my phone off and just listen. Victor smiled slightly. "They're teaching me how to cook. I'm terrible at it. It's never too late to learn." The words settled between them, carrying weight beyond cooking lessons. "They'd like to see you again. Both of them asked if you and Lily might come for dinner Saturday. No pressure, no obligation, just they'd like to say thank you properly." Carter thought about Lily's question that morning. Will you know today? He could go home now and tell her that yes, he knew. She was staying with him, forever. And maybe they could share that victory with people who'd helped make it possible, even inadvertently. "Saturday works. What time?"
The weekend passed in a blur of celebration and relief. Nancy Miller had cried when Carter told her the news, clutching him tight enough to crack ribs. Frank Turner gave him the rest of the week off with pay, gruffly insisting that family came first. Lily didn't fully understand what had happened, but recognized that Daddy was happy in a way he hadn't been for months. Saturday evening, Carter dressed in his one pair of nice jeans and a button-down shirt Nancy had ironed. Lily wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with sunflowers that she'd picked out herself from Goodwill 3 months ago. They drove to West University Place, navigating streets where houses sat behind gates and landscaped yards. Victor's address led to a 2-story colonial with white columns and black shutters, the kind of place Carter would normally only see while driving past. Sophia and Claire answered the door together, identical smiles lighting identical faces. They'd abandoned their expensive clothes for jeans and t-shirts, their hair pulled back in casual ponytails. "Mr. Hayes, you came!" "Call me Carter. And this is Lily." Lily had been bouncing with excitement in the car, but now pressed against Carter's leg, suddenly shy. Claire knelt down to her level, same way Dr. Morgan had done. "Hi, Lily. Your dad told us you like to draw. We have a whole room full of art supplies. Want to see?" Lily looked up at Carter for permission. He nodded. She took Claire's offered hand tentatively, letting herself be led inside. Ver appeared from deeper in the house, wearing an apron that read, "World's Okayest Cook" in faded letters. "Carter, welcome. Fair warning, I'm attempting dinner. It may be inedible." The house's interior surprised Carter, comfortable rather than ostentatious, family photos covering walls instead of expensive art. Pictures of Sophia and Claire at various ages, graduations and birthdays, and ordinary moments captured and displayed like treasures. Recent photos stood on the mantel, Ver and his daughters at dinner, laughing. The 3 of them covered in paint, refinishing something wooden. Candid shots that spoke of time spent together rather than occasions documented. "Your home is beautiful. It's been empty too long. I'm trying to fill it with what matters." Victor led Carter toward the kitchen, where something was definitely burning. "Damn it!" He pulled a smoking pan from the oven, revealing what might have once been chicken, but now looked like charcoal. Sophia appeared, taking in the disaster with practiced ease. "Dad, we talked about this. Timer. You have to actually listen when it goes off." "I thought I had more time." "The timer doesn't lie." She grabbed her phone. "Pizza okay with everyone?" The evening devolved into ordered pizza and genuine laughter. Lily came out of her shell around Claire, the 2 of them spreading out art supplies on the dining room table and creating masterpieces that involved more glitter than any surface needed. Carter found himself relaxing for the first time in months, the weight of custody battle finally lifting enough to let him breathe. He sat on the couch with Victor while Sophia told increasingly embarrassing stories about her father's attempts at domestic competence. Last week, he tried to do laundry, turned everything pink. The instructions were unclear. "Dad, it literally says separate whites from colors on every machine." Victor took the ribbing with good humor, clearly enjoying his daughter's attention even when it came wrapped in mockery. Carter recognized the shift. This man was actively trying to be present, stumbling through it, but trying nonetheless. After pizza, while the girls played in the backyard visible through large windows, Victor and Carter stood at the kitchen counter, drinking coffee that Victor had managed not to ruin. "Can I ask you something?" Victor's tone shifted serious. "How do you do it? Work full-time, single parent, stay present for Lily?" Carter considered the question, thinking about mornings he'd woken exhausted and evenings he'd fallen asleep mid-story. "Honestly, I don't do it well. I'm tired all the time. I miss things. But the alternative is not being there at all.
and that's not an option.
You work at Sullivan's HVAC, correct?
Yeah, why?
I know John Miller. We went to law school together. He runs Johnson Commercial Systems. They do HVAC for office buildings, hospitals, large installations. Victor paused. They're looking for a supervisor, someone with technical knowledge and leadership experience. Carter's defenses went up immediately. Victor, before you refuse, hear me out.
John mentioned this opening weeks ago. I didn't say anything because of the custody case, didn't want any appearance of impropriety. But the case is over, and this is a legitimate job opening.
What's it pay? $65,000 base, full benefits, regular hours, 7 to 4, Monday through Friday. The number hit Carter like electricity. $65,000, nearly double what he made killing himself across 2 jobs. Benefits that meant he could take Lily to the doctor without calculating whether he could afford the copay. Why would you tell me this? Because you're qualified. Because my daughters won't stop talking about how you helped them. And this is something concrete I can offer that's not charity. It's a real opportunity. Victor met his eyes. Call John yourself. Interview. If he doesn't think you're right for the position, that's that. But at least find out.
Carter turned the idea over, looking for the catch. And if I take it, there's no obligation? No favors owed?
None. Though I wouldn't turn down an invitation to your next Saturday pancake breakfast. Sophia and Claire seem to think you're an expert. Something in Carter's chest loosened. He thought about being home for Lily's bedtime every night, about not working until exhaustion became his baseline, about giving his daughter stability that didn't require sacrificing his own health.
Give me John's number. Victor did, typing it into Carter's phone. For what it's worth, you helped my daughters more than you know. They've been trying to tell me for years that I was choosing wrong. It took a stranger in a storm to make me actually hear them. Through the window, Lily and Claire were teaching Sophia some kind of complicated clapping game, all 3 of them dissolving into giggles when they messed up the pattern. They're good kids, Carter observed. They are, despite my best efforts to raise them on neglect and good intentions. Victor's smile turned self-deprecating. I'm trying to do better. Taking them to dinner without my phone, teaching them to drive even though it terrifies me, just being there. That's all they want. Kids don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. The words hung in the air between them, simple truth that carried decades of mistakes and possibilities. Lily ran inside, grass stains on her yellow dress and joy written across her face. Daddy, can we come back next week? Sophia said she'd teach me to make friendship bracelets. Carter looked at Victor, who nodded. Next Saturday. Jessie time. The drive home happened in comfortable silence, Lily clutching a drawing Claire had made for her. 2 stick figures labeled Lily and Claire, surrounded by hearts and stars. She fell asleep before they reached 3rd Ward, head lolling against the car window. Carter carried her upstairs, her weight familiar and precious in his arms. Nancy had left the door unlocked, a plate of cookies covered on the counter with a note. Thought you might want something sweet after your visit. Proud of you, honey. He tucked Lily into bed without waking her, pulling the covers up to her chin and smoothing her hair back. The yellow walls he'd painted seemed brighter somehow, or maybe he was just seeing them without the filter of fear that had colored everything for months. In the living room, Carter pulled out his phone, stared at John Miller's contact information that Victor had entered, made the call before he could talk himself out of it. John answered on the 3rd ring, his voice carrying the rough edges of someone who'd worked his way up from installation crews to corner office. They talked for 20 minutes, Carter's experience, the supervisor role, expectations and responsibilities. Victor spoke highly of you.
Said you're the kind of guy who shows up and does the work without drama. I try to be. Can you come in Monday? 10 a.m. We'll talk details. I'll show you the operation. See if it's a fit. Carter agreed, ended the call, and sat in the quiet of his small apartment, processing the possibility. A real job with regular hours, benefits, the chance to be home for dinner every night, the chance to build something stable for Lily without destroying himself in the process. Sunday morning brought pancake tradition back in full force. Lily stood on her step stool, stirring batter with the concentrated focus she brought to important tasks. Carter supervised, adding chocolate chips because victories deserved celebrating. "Daddy, are you happy now?" The question caught him mid-flip. He looked at his daughter, flour on her nose, syrup already somehow in her hair despite not having eaten yet. 6 years old and perceptive enough to read his emotions better than he could sometimes. "Yeah, baby, I'm happy." "Because I get to stay?" "Because we get to stay together. Forever." She beamed at him, gap-toothed and beautiful. "I knew we would. I knew it the whole time." Carter wished he'd had her certainty, wished he'd trusted that love and presence would outweigh money and square footage. But maybe the fear had been necessary. Maybe it had pushed him to fight as hard as he had. The Monday interview with John Miller went better than Carter dared hope. The facility was impressive, clean, organized, crews that clearly knew their work. John offered him the position on the spot, pending background check and drug screening that Carter knew he'd pass easily. He gave Frank Turner 2 weeks' notice at the HVAC shop, and Frank responded by throwing an impromptu celebration lunch for the whole crew. At the diner, Carter gave them 1 week's notice and left with a card signed by every waitress wishing him well. 2 weeks later, Carter started at Johnson Commercial Systems. The work was challenging but manageable. The crew respected him, and for the first time in years, he left work at 4 p.m. and drove home with energy still left for his daughter. Saturday became ritual with Victor and his daughters. Sometimes they attempted cooking together, Victor's skills improving slowly under Carter's patient instruction. Sometimes they just ordered takeout and played board games that Lily usually won through a combination of luck and ruthless 6-year-old strategy. Sophia left for Columbia Law in August, tearful but excited. Claire started teaching kindergarten at West Shore Elementary. Verse Victor stepped down from the federal bench that fall, taking a part-time position teaching at University of South Florida Law School. Jess sent letters every few weeks, updating Carter on her progress. 9 months became 12, then 18. She never missed a supervised visit, showing up sober and engaged. Slowly, carefully, she and Lily began rebuilding something that might eventually become a relationship. Carter and Victor's friendship deepened through shared Saturday mornings and occasional phone calls where they talked about parenting struggles and small victories. Victor was learning to be present. Carter was learning that accepting help wasn't weakness. On a warm October evening, 1 year after that first storm, Carter stood in Victor's backyard watching Lily play on the treehouse they'd built together over 3 months of weekends. Simple construction, platform, ladder, walls, roof, but sturdy enough to last. Victor appeared beside him, 2 beers in hand. They'd developed this routine, standing on the patio while the girls played, talking about nothing and everything. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Victor took a long drink. "A year ago, my daughters were stranded in a storm. A stranger stopped when no one else would. And that stranger changed everything. I just gave them a ride. You did more than that. You reminded them that people still help each other. You reminded me what being a father actually means." Victor turned to face him. "I spent 20 years building a career, telling myself I was providing for my daughters. But they didn't need what I could buy them. They needed me. You're here now. That's what matters. Because you showed me what here looks like."
Victor raised his beer slightly. To stopping in storms. Carter clinked his bottle against Victor's. To showing up. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lily and Claire create some elaborate game involving the treehouse and approximately 200 stuffed animals. The Florida sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Carter's phone buzzed. A text from Jess. 18 months today. Counselor says I'm ready for unsupervised visits, if you're comfortable with that. No pressure, just wanted you to know. He showed Victor the message. What do you think? I think she's been consistent, shown up, stayed clean, done the work. Lily deserves a mother if her mother can actually be present. Carter typed back. Let's start with a few hours. Saturday afternoon next week. We'll see how it goes. Jess's response came immediately. Thank you. I won't let her down. Carter hoped that was true. Hoped Jess had found whatever she needed to be the mother Lily deserved. But he'd learned this year that hope was dangerous without preparation, that trust required evidence. They'd take it slow. Watch how Jess handled responsibility. Let Lily's comfort level guide the pace. Lily's laughter rang across the yard, pure and joyful. Claire was chasing her around the treehouse, both of them shrieking with delight. Sophia's latest letter sat on Victor's kitchen counter, full of law school stories and homesickness and gratitude for Saturday video calls with her father. I've been thinking about something else, Victor said quietly. All those years I thought success meant winning cases, building a reputation, making partner and then judge. But watching you with Lily, building this life on modest means and pure presence, that's success. That's what significance actually looks like. Carter thought about the cramped apartment that had terrified him during the custody battle, about second-hand furniture and handmade bookshelves and yellow paint that Lily had chosen because it was a happy color, about the drawing that still sat on his dashboard, Daddy and Me Forever, in careful first-grade letters. Success is what you achieve. Significance is who you impact. The words settled into the evening air, joining the sounds of children playing and the distant hum of Tampa traffic. Victor nodded slowly, recognizing truth when he heard it. They stood together as the sky darkened, two fathers from completely different worlds who'd found unexpected friendship in a hurricane's aftermath. Both of them learning, growing, figuring out how to be present for daughters who taught them that showing up mattered more than anything money could buy. Lily called from the treehouse. Daddy, come see what we built! Carter handed his beer to Victor and jogged across the yard, climbing the ladder to where his daughter waited with a proud smile and an elaborate construction of stuffed animals arranged in complex social hierarchy. He settled beside her on the platform, letting her explain the intricate relationships she'd created. Claire sat on Lily's other side, adding commentary about the stuffed giraffe's romantic troubles. From the patio, Victor watched them with an expression of contentment Carter had never seen on his face before. His phone rang, probably work-related, probably important, and he pulled it from his pocket, looked at the screen, and deliberately powered it off. Then he climbed the treehouse ladder himself, squeezing onto the platform with the three of them, listening to Lily's story about the stuffed giraffe with the same focused attention he once gave Supreme Court briefs. The October evening stretched long and warm. A year ago, Carter had stopped in a storm because it was the right thing to do. He hadn't known those two stranded girls would lead him here, to friendship and stability and the slow rebuilding of a life that no longer required sacrifice of everything he had just to survive. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses created the biggest changes. Sometimes helping strangers saved you as much as it saved them. Sometimes one choice in a hurricane became the foundation for family built not on blood or obligation, but on presence, gratitude, and the simple act of showing up. Carter Hayes had learned that the hard way, had fought for his daughter with everything he possessed and discovered that everything he possessed was exactly enough when combined with people willing to see value in presence over providing. The treehouse creaked slightly in the breeze. Lily leaned against Carter's shoulder, still narrating her stuffed animal drama. Claire added sound effects. Victor laughed, real and genuine and free. And in that moment, perched on a platform they'd built together, Carter understood what grace actually meant. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of people willing to weather storms beside you. Kids didn't need perfect parents. They needed present ones. And present was exactly what Carter intended to be, for all the days and years ahead, for this daughter who'd taught him that love without presence was just a word, but presence with love could change entire worlds. Starting with his own.